Your head is pounding, you're exhausted, nauseated, and irritated, and your roommate cannot stop making chewing sounds. So, what exactly is a hangover? What causes it, and is there any way to cure it? Today, I will give you the bare essentials of a hangover from a drug scientist's perspective. So first, what is a hangover? So my favorite description of this comes from a scientific article that says that it is a feeling of general misery. That is literally the language they used. That exists for sometimes over 24 hours after you stop drinking. And what's weird about it is that it exists only when you quit using the drug. So only when it reaches about 0 in your system, that's when a hangover starts, which is strange compared to basically every other drug out there. Now, hangovers cause hundreds of billions of dollars of lost productivity every year, but we rarely study them in science, probably because of a bunch of different reasons. So we might just stigmatize people who drink too much and say like, okay, well, it's their fault. They should continue to have a hangover. And there's also a theory that if you try to treat hangovers, that will make people more likely to drink in the future. And we know that drinking has a lot of like personal harm and societal harm. So we don't actually want to promote that behavior. Now, one of the problems with studying hangovers is that we don't actually have even correct symptoms of hangovers sometimes. Sometimes we make them up. So for example, sound sensitivity. You might think that your roommate scratching a fork against a plate is driving you up the wall because you have a hangover and that makes you more sensitive to sound. Now, studies as early as 1975 say that our sound system, so our hearing, I don't know why I said it that way, our hearing is actually not changed when you have a hangover. So you're not more sensitive to sounds. Technically, if you have a headache, those sounds might be more annoying to you, but you're not actually more sensitive to them. I'm going to add this in because a lot of people use AI for their sources of information. But in this case, AI just like literally lies. So AI is talking about glutamate hypersensitivity as like this rebound effect that's causing sound sensitivity. Now, I got curious about this because I had never heard about this in the field. And one of the people that was suggested as a source was David Nutt. And I'm like, okay, I've read a lot of David Nutt's work. I don't think he says anything like this. And it turns out that, yeah, no, he doesn't, even in his most recent articles. So where this information came from, nobody knows, but it's not from actual valid science. It sounds so scientific. Okay, anyways, back to dehydration. So we know that dehydration is just one aspect of a hangover, and that's responsible for you feeling thirsty, shockingly, and you having a dry mouth, also surprising. And it's also linked to things like headaches. This is only one aspect of what actually occurs during a hangover. So you can treat the dehydration, but that's not necessarily treating all of the aspects of a hangover, a lot of which we still don't know why they occur. So some of the theories include that there's a buildup of oxidative stress in your system, which is caused by basically alcohol being broken down into one specific aspect, acetaldehyde. So an increase in oxidative stress is damaging things like cells and tissues, and therefore you're just going to feel worse because of that increase in oxidative stress. So that's one reason. So you got dehydration, you got oxidative stress, and you also have things like an inflammatory response. So your immune system is basically being activated because you're drinking too much. Now, all of these things seem to be working together, and some of them can actually better predict a hangover. So for example, the more dehydrated you get seems to be linked to how severe your hangover is. But then there's also all of these factors like genetics, like what type of alcohol you're drinking. If you're curious about why some people have a hangover and not others, let me know and I can make an entire video about this. You know I would love to talk about it. So you have all of these things causing a hangover, but then you also have other things, like you drank a lot the night before, which means that your sleep wasn't as great. You might have used other drugs at the same time. Drunk people are not known for eating well, so you could have had incredibly high-fat meals, or you could have had nothing, or you could have just had fries and a giant sundae. All of these things are going to make you feel worse the next day. But what does it have to do with an actual hangover? We're not entirely sure. We don't even have great animal models. Now, one of the studies suggests that we have no animal models, which is untrue. We do actually have animal models of hangovers. And you can cause a rat hangover by, quote, repeatedly stimulating the rat dura mater with an inflammatory soup. And like the research that we have with humans is not great. Like most of what we have is just self-report, and none of them are these great studies where they're like, let's make people drunk, see how hungover they get, and then see what we can do to decrease that hangover. So here's what we actually know about hangover cures. And I get bored and make spreadsheets apparently. So at some point I made a spreadsheet of what has actually worked for hangover cures. So I will put that in the comments if you want to see it. So I'll divide this into things that work. And when I say things that work, I mean our terrible studies suggest that they might do something. Things that maybe work, so things that our terrible studies suggest that maybe they could do something, but some studies say no, so even worse evidence, and things that definitely do not work. Under the weird but probably yes category are kudzu root, Houvinia dulcis, and even things like Korean pear juice. And they work by reducing that toxic metabolite that alcohol creates. Tolfenamic acid and ginseng seem to maybe work by decreasing oxidative stress. Borage might work by being anti-inflammatory, and Pia morris and L-cysteine might work by decreasing the kind of damage to your liver. Now, L-cysteine is kind of behind the idea that you should eat eggs the day after because it's found in high levels in things like eggs and turkey. So that might actually work, but it seems specific to the food that actually has high levels of that. So just eating like a high-fat meal or just eating a large meal in general seems to not actually help with anything. Now, there's a huge problem with all of this, and that is that they're all basically supplements, and supplements are unregulated. We don't even guarantee what's in it, and they're not supposed to make health claims. So they're not supposed to say that they can do things like cure a hangover, but over 2/3 of them do. Now, under the maybe category, we have things like yeast extracts. There's an entire market for this. And noni fruit and milk thistle. And milk thistle is one of the common ingredients that's found in all of those like hangover packets. So like maybe they might do something, but there's also studies that say that they do nothing. And shockingly, the ones that say that they do things, sometimes sponsored by the people who make it. Under the no category, number 1 is hair of the dog. It is basically just postponing your hangover. It is not helping. And caffeine, I'm sorry to tell you, might actually make hangovers worse. There's this idea that activated charcoal, so doing something like burning your toast, that might help with it. No, that does not work either. And propranolol, which people take for like blood pressure medication and also for migraines, I take it, that does not work either. Do not randomly decide to use your prescription medication to try to help with a hangover. It's not a good idea. What about prickly pear, artichoke, and asparagus? No, you can feel free to eat them, but they're not helping with your hangover either. And there are some things that just treat the other symptoms. So aspirin and acetaminophen might help with the headache, but they can also, if you use them long-term, be associated with things like stomach bleeding and liver issues. And the beloved banana bag and Pedialyte. So IV administration of like vitamins with water, that might help with dehydration, but that will help with like the short-term hangover symptoms, not the actual hangover. That's true of water too. Drinking water helps with dehydration, but it's not going to treat the other symptoms of a hangover. So it can't hurt to have an egg breakfast, but probably skip the coffee and the mimosa. Mostly just grin and bear it because we don't know much about it and we're unlikely to study it in the future.